Today I want to talk to you about three competing land ethics. The first one is anthropocentric ethics. Anthropocentric ethics is the dominant ethic that human beings apply to the environment. This is all human-centered. It's all about our benefit as we interact with the environment. And it's almost always, if not always, driven by economic factors. Back in the late 50s, early 60s, there was a decision to move out of urban areas, cities, into what we call suburban areas or the countryside. And so farmland became very valuable. We needed a place to reestablish communities and homes. Builders who were going to provide housing and infrastructure to city dwellers so they could leave the city and move out into the countryside had to make a decision what kind of land they wanted to build on. Now, for reasons of transportation, cost, economics, most farms were located right around the urban centers or the city centers because it took less money to get their produce to the market, so they could charge a little bit more money for their product, make a little bit better margin, have a little better lifestyle. And so builders were faced with the decision, did they want to build on farmland or did they want to build on forest land, because both existed outside of the urban areas. Well, if you know anything about building and anything about farming, you know that farmland, by a large measure, has been cleared of roots and rocks, trees, any kind of debris that would interfere with establishing a community, electrical lines, sewer lines, water lines, etc., etc. So the obvious choice from an economic point of view was to choose farmland. Many farmers were more than glad to trade their land in for money. They are known to be land rich but money poor. They fall into hard times because the environment doesn't always cooperate, so they're in debt. They have hundreds and maybe thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres, and oftentimes they're in debt because the seasons do not always allow them to make the profit that they could make if all environmental conditions were always at their best when it came to producing produce and being able to sell it to the human population. And so builders went to farmers and asked them, would you like $2,000, $3,000, for a while it got up to $5,000 and $6,000 per acre of land. And the farmers began to sell their land. And builders went in, this land's already cleared, so maybe it would cost them $5,000 to put homes on instead of $15,000 because they'd had to clear away the trees and the rocks and all the underbrush, etc., etc. And so we expanded out of urban areas into suburban or community areas outside of the city, and it made good economic sense. So that's the important feature of anthropocentric ethics. It's all human-centered. How does it benefit us as human beings? The environment is not included in that picture. I mean, there's so much of the environment. How much harm could we be doing? That's been the mentality, the mental state of anthropocentric ethics. And again, because it's driven by economics, by the dollar bill, and it didn't seem to be hurting the environment or reducing the ability of the environment to flourish by too great a degree, we moved into suburban areas and we maximized our profit. That's at the heart and the center of anthropocentric ethics. Now, competing ethic is called individualistics. Individualistic ethics wants to give nature the same rights that you and I have. Now, that's a nice concept, the right to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. What this individualistic ethics fails to take into account is that natural rights that we have are based upon what we call an adversarial system of justice. In other words, if I feel wronged, I take you to court. I become a plaintiff, I bring a charge, you become a defendant, and you defend yourself. If I win the argument, you owe me. If I lose the argument, it doesn't cost you anything. Perhaps I even owe you something for your time and energies and your court costs, etc., etc. Now, the problem with giving nature the same rights that we have is I can't take nature to court. I buy a grapefruit tree and I'm told I have to wait for 3 years before I get fruit. 3 years goes by and for whatever reason the tree never produces any fruit. Well, I'm going to take the grapefruit tree to court. How do I get my money back? It's an untenable situation. In theory it sounds nice, but when it comes down to humanity and how we deal with each other, what our system of general welfare and relationship is within a society cannot be applied to the environment. Then here comes holistic ethics. Holistic ethics understands that this cannot work. It does not want to give nature rights. What it wants to give nature is respect. What it says is human beings, if they disrespect nature, as we grow in population, and we are exploding in population, about 6 billion of us now. In another 50 years, we're going to multiply by 50%. There'll be 12 billion of us. Who knows how many billions 100 years from now. If everybody in the world lived at the level of luxury that we do here in America, we would need 3 planet Earths and the resources on those planets, at least the resources we've discovered so far. And so what holistic ethics says is, one, you're not going to change anthropocentric ethics. We're involved in having to survive. That has to do with wealth and finance and exchange and commerce. And it's not going to work to give nature rights. If there are killer bees on your land and they've been there for 50 years and you buy the land and they start biting your children and killing them, individualistic rights would say, well, they're right. They were there first. They were squatters before you were. We're going to look at that and say that's just untenable. I mean, bees can't get to live where we need the land, where we need to habitate, where we need to set down our roots and raise our families and our communities. But if individualistic ethics had its way, the bees were there first. We could not kill them. That would be murdering people. They have rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What would it do to hunting? You don't want to be hunted. The golden rule, do to others as you would have them do to you. If you don't want to be hunted, you can't be hunting them, you can't be fishing them, etc., etc., and etc. So individualistic ethics on many levels just doesn't seem to make good societal sense to us, and therefore it doesn't make good environmental sense to us. But holistic ethics has an appeal. What holistic ethics says is we need to stop looking at ourselves as conquerors of the environment and realize that we're citizens of the environment, that we're an integrated part of the biotic pyramid. We regulate it in a way that no one else in the environment can. We can be rapers of the environment. We can take everything we want without thought of the consequences. We can be repairers of the environment, where we do harm to it and then we try and repair it, strip mining, and we try and reclaim the land. Or we can take on the role of replenishers, of healers, and we can put more back in than we take out in an attempt to sustain the environment, to grow the environment, in fact, so that we can get even more benefit out of it. And this is at the heart of Aldo Leopold's ethic. His ethic is called holistic ethics. Of course, again, it asks for respect, not rights, but respect for nature. It says that we need to begin philosophically to look at ourselves as citizens of the environment. And even though we make many decisions based on finances, on wealth, there are times when, for the betterment not only of the environment, but for ourselves as an integral part of the environment, perhaps finances need to take second place rather than first place. And as citizens of the environment, out of respect for the environment, we do some things that benefit us in general, even though it doesn't provide a financial stimulus for us. And that's the distinction between the three. Very important. You will see this. This holistic ethic has not come into place. It's something that philosophically is being discussed right now. On the anthropocentric side, the reason that we've adopted this in the early days, it was everyone for themselves, mano a mano. Then we decided, no, we'd get more out of life if we cooperated, so we have cooperation and competition. That's what produces the drive for wealth and economics. We can still maintain that, Leopold says, in a holistic approach, but we have to modify it a little bit. Again, respect for the environment. After all, we are part of the environment. We are dependent on the environment. There are some environmentalists who've crunched some numbers and said that nature every year gives us about $30 billion of free services: clean air, clean water, fertilization, the bees and bugs that take pollen from plants and they spread it around other plants. They're male-female plants. That's how they become fertilized and how they produce, in a sense, more offspring, more fruit, more plants, reproduction. And those are all free services, and we benefit from them tremendously, about $30 billion a year. So if we adopt the role of citizens, we can still make money off the environment. But we now realize that our position in the environment is integrated with it in a symbiotic relationship. We have the kind of majority say. We can be rapers, we can be repairers, or we can choose to be replenishers and citizens of the environment. And that's Aldo Leopold's recommendation from an environmental ethical point of view.